All right, RJ, we just finished with day one of the 2022 free agency frenzy, fiasco. It all depends on what your team did, really. Really excited to talk about all the moves that the Kraken did today. Real quick, though, just before everybody leaves a sea of comments, yes, I'm recording this at my grandparents' house, and to make the Wi-Fi work as best as possible, I'm sitting in a stairwell with this old-timey picture behind me, and then also some creepy dolls. So if I go flying down this stairwell I'm currently sitting in, we all know who did it. All right. So of all the signings they made today, perhaps long term, the biggest one that the Kraken made was, of course, signing Shane Wright to his ELC. Really cool that Ron Francis walked out onto the ice after the scrimmage today and signed him there in front of all the fans. That was a really cool and special moment. But really, we'll talk about Shane Wright, his performance, all the prospects' performance at the development camp scrimmage in the next episode of the deep dive. This video, we're just going to try to keep it short and sweet and focus on the free agency signings. You down with that, RJ?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, awesome. I guess the other thing I will say real quick, if you followed us at all on Discord and probably Twitter or really any of the Kraken media today, you'll know that we spent a lot of time waiting for Ron Francis. Obviously, it was a very busy day for him today. So between the end of the development camp scrimmage and then when we actually all got to speak with Ron Francis, it was about 4 hours.
Yeah,
of just waiting because at any time he was going to be available to speak to the media. But what that taught me, RJ, as a takeaway, as someone who's not around everybody all the time the way you are, was how thankful, especially on a day like today and free agency day, how thankful I am that the Kraken media scene is as amazing as it is. Because you'll look at some of these other, media groups or team media sections, right, around the NHL, and you have the ones where it's filled with all these people who have been on that beat for 40 years, so they're untouchable and they just blast the team all the time because they're just miserable people or whatever. You have the people that are just constantly trying to make rumors. I can think of a couple teams like that, always pushing things these last couple weeks about things that weren't going to happen or were for sure going to happen, and then of course they don't or they do happen, right, respectively. And I'm just so thankful that the Kraken media scene is filled with such wonderful people that just, at the end of the day, care about the Kraken and care about this community, because it really is one of those things. The Kraken need fans. The fans, I don't think the fans really need us, but thankfully they want us, right? And we, work around all of that. And so I was just really thankful that if I had to be stuck in a room with people for 4 hours, it was this group of people. And I thought that we actually, we made it an okay time.
Absolutely. Well said. And it's a good group of people to kill 4 hours with, lots of fun jokes and banter back and forth. And, as the news from elsewhere around the league was breaking, some really smart hockey minds to discuss it with too. So it was a really fun time, and I'm glad you were able to be there for it.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it was always we were just excited when the Kraken did something, just like all of you are. And so let's go ahead and dive into what the Kraken did do today. I think we should start with the biggest signing, RJ, the Andre Burakovsky signing, because this was something that we definitely spent time talking about on the free agency preview of the deep dive just a couple days ago. Maybe my opinions on this did not age very well, but overall, I've really come around because the term and the money involved here is it's excellent.
It is, and it looks very different than what we were expecting. I think both of us maybe thought 7-year deal in the range of 6.5 to 7 a year, those kind of inflated free agency prices. But the Burakovsky deal, in fact, comes out to 5 years at an AAV of $5.5 million, which looks quite reasonable, especially looking around the league at the rest of this free agent market. The term is something that's manageable for a 27-year-old, signs until he's 32. Looking at the aging curves, you should get ahead of most of the drop-off for a player like that. $5.5 million is not too bad as far as the cap hit. I think the contract projection from Evolving Hockey was $6.9 million on a 7-year deal. So that would be quite a lot more, and I think something that neither of us would have wanted. But I think this is fair value, and certainly for a player on the ice that's a good fit for the Kraken. I don't think either of us really denied that right away he's going to be exactly what the Kraken need and is going to help them get better.
Exactly. He's a winger who can play both sides, which I think is very important for the Kraken. And I mean, really any team, that's just awesome to have that flexibility. And yeah, I mean, thinking about it, one, I always felt like those numbers for him were really high. I thought he could get there, especially after Forsberg re-signed. I was just because the market was going to be so thin on high-end forwards, and Nichushkin re-signed in Colorado. I was really worried that the number for him was going to get really high. But I think 5.5 it's a good spot for him. That puts you right on that cusp of being like top line production as far as your expectation and everything versus just being a solid contributor night in, night out. And I think he's going to be that for the Kraken. The other big concern I had for him was just like the difference in his numbers between being in Washington and then going to Colorado. And I was like, well, of course it's easy to, have these great numbers once you get to Colorado. You have all this lineup protection. You're getting to play with all these good players, all that kind of stuff. But as I thought about it, sticking him on Matty Beniers' wing, he's going to have that similar stuff. He's going to be playing with a really smart, really talented hockey player who's going to be able to get him the puck in all sorts of different situations. And, we saw that from Matty today during the scrimmage. I mean, his passing ability, we talk about his scoring and everything, but his passing ability is really next level. And I think him and his work ethic and the way he just wants to drive offense all the time and really drive the play, I think that's going to gel really well with Burakovsky. And Burakovsky is going to, follow that lead, and Matty's going to put him in positions to score. And so I don't think his numbers, after I thought about it, after they signed him, I don't believe now that his numbers are really going to drop off the way I was worried about before, just because before I was like, who's he going to be playing with? Like Alex Wenberg or something? You know what I mean? Like I was like, how is that going to work out? But no, he's going to play with Matty Beniers. Like this is their big free agent signing. This is the big move that we were waiting for, the big splash from Ron Francis to prove that, no, I want this team to be competitive. That player's going to play with Matty Beniers. You know what I mean? And so I think that's going to be a really good fit for him.
Yeah, that is the book on Burakovsky. He needs to be with someone who drives play. When he's with those kind of players, he can create a line that's kind of more than the sum of its parts, even with how good he is offensively. But yeah, Matty Beniers, really impressive again in the scrimmage today, and I'm excited to see what he can do with Burakovsky. And you look at opportunity, you talk about the numbers that Burakovsky put up last season, and there are a few different ways you could look at it, right? Because he was with a very talented Avs team, had some very good teammates, but also he was playing third line minutes. There's a lot of room for him to play more and to get more opportunities, say, on the power play. He was not on the first unit power play, and that's one of the things that Ron Francis hinted at when we talked to him about Burakovsky, is he said, I think he's got an opportunity to move into a bigger role here. And he mentioned the power play specifically. Burakovsky is someone who's going to be on that first unit power play and really have an opportunity to shine there with a lot more chances to score. And so you think it might even out some of those scoring numbers.
Exactly. I thought when he brought that up, that was another kind of like moment where it all clicked for me. It was like, oh yeah, you know what? This guy was a guy that was at times just left off altogether from the power play in Colorado, just because there were so many pieces there that they could utilize, that he wasn't necessarily getting any power play time. And here he's going to be, probably he's going to have a really good shot at being a first line player. So that's going to be a lot of extra minutes. He's going to be playing with the most talented guy on the team in Matty Beniers, unlike in Colorado where he wasn't going to get that opportunity. And here he's going to for sure get a lot of power play time. And so even if his numbers dip from, not having the like lineup protection and stuff that he had in Colorado, I got to think that the power play stuff is going to more than make up for that, any sort of dip he'd see there, and just the extra playing time in general. So I think, do I think he's going to increase his scoring numbers a ton and he's going to be a 30-goal guy and an 80-point guy? No, I'm still probably skeptical of that. But I do think that with the way the Kraken are set up and how he's going to fit in with the team, I think we're probably going to see very similar levels of production to what he was doing in Colorado. And that's going to be more than enough to be, make this contract worth it for the Kraken.
Yeah, and that's where the numbers come into play, where you have the term and the money, where at least at this term and money, Burakovsky has a chance of providing some value there. If he can just kind of maintain that production, even a slight drop off, he can still provide some value.
Exactly. So I'm really, really optimistic about this signing. I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do with the Kraken. So from one signing, as that takes care of their need at top six, really, let's talk about another need that Ron Francis addressed today with the signing, and that was Justin Schultz. Bringing him in on the defense kind of fills in that right-handed right side D that they were looking for, and also a puck mover. This was one that it made a ton of sense when it was announced, but I just didn't think of it beforehand.
Right, we were talking about that fit, and you brought up Colin Miller as someone who could potentially fill that spot. And I think there's a lot of similarities with Schultz as far as how they might fit into the lineup. Puck moving right shot D, kind of exactly what they need. You could talk about him maybe as kind of a poor man's Klingberg option. I like to think of him as a value Klingberg option. Mm-hmm. And Ron Francis definitely seemed to be optimistic about what Schultz could bring from that standpoint. He talked about Schultz being kind of stuck behind John Carlson or in Washington, or a Chris Letang in Pittsburgh, but they really liked what they saw with him on those second unit power plays, and that maybe if you moved him either to the first unit or kind of sharing a 1A, 1B type of thing, that he could be really successful. This is clearly something that the Kraken scouting kind of uncovered that they really liked.
And Ron Francis talked a lot about speaking with people in Pittsburgh and how highly the people in Pittsburgh spoke about him and felt about him. And, I remember watching him in Pittsburgh, and he really was kind of like this nice little bit of offense or certainly of puck moving ability lower down on their defensive pairings, that you and I got to see like first person, right, in that Stanley Cup final in 2016. So I do think that he's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle over the years, the last little bit here, but I'm excited about this. And gosh, it's just so interesting to think of him too, right? Because like for so long, he's kind of been around and in the conversation of things. I just go back to, he was like the first guy I can remember being the first guy that was drafted, didn't want to sign in Anaheim, I believe it was, and goes the college route and then comes out as, an unrestricted free agent after that college route, after playing in Wisconsin, and signs with the Oilers. If I have that all right. Am I right? Did I dust off my history?
Yes, and there was kind of this bidding war for him coming out of college, and it was, I think one of the first times that really happened.
Yeah, and so that seems like such ancient history to me now, but I've been following him, all that time, and the one thing that sticks out is just that, yes, he is a consistent puck mover. He makes your bottom four, your bottom pairing, even if that's where he's going to play with the Kraken, better. And I do think that he's going to be a more consistent second unit power play quarterback than what they had last year.
Agreed. And the playmaking ability is something that you could look at it as possibly special. One of the things that we looked at was kind of his player card, the J-Fresh player cards afterward. And overall, there was a lot of red. It wasn't the prettiest picture necessarily. But one thing that clearly stood out was the 100th percentile in primary assists per 60. So, ability to get the puck to places where it's going to score is huge for him. And I think that could do well with the Kraken.
Right. Now, as I mentioned at the start of that, we did not talk about Justin Schultz in our preview. We did talk about Burakovsky. Someone else we talked about in our preview was Martin Jones, once again fulfilling another need that Ron Francis going ahead and signing Martin Jones to a 1-year, $2 million contract. With trade protection, which is kind of interesting on a contract like that. Generally, on 1-year contracts, you're not giving that. But overall, just kind of what do you think about bringing in Martin Jones?
I've thought about it a lot today. Clearly, I was not very optimistic on the prospect of the Kraken bringing in Martin Jones when we talked about it on the podcast. You predicted it though. You were kind of right on the money there. And look, I followed the Sharks very closely for the years that he was there. I got to see a lot of Martin Jones playing. I will just flat out say he was not good for the end of that time. He was very good at the start, has not been that same goalie for a number of years. But the more I think about it today, I think the Kraken probably didn't have a lot of options as far as someone who's essentially a disposable goalie until Chris Drieger comes back. It's a tough spot to try and convince guys to sign into. And of the options they had, I think there's a case to be made, at least on paper, that he is the best option there. When you just look at the stats, don't necessarily watch him play, that there's a case to be made. And so I'm okay with this deal. I think 1 year, of course, that's going to be the term. $2 million, that's kind of the going rate. It's a little expensive for a backup, but this is a situation that maybe not everyone will want to come into. And so maybe you're left signing more of an AHL guy if you don't do this. As for the trade protection, I mean, first of all, I just thought that was funny when you told me about it. He's got a modified no trade clause on this deal, Martin Jones. But it makes sense to me because if you're Martin Jones, you have to look at the possibility that the Kraken are going to trade you. Let's say Drieger does come back in January or February and he's ready to go. The Kraken might look to trade you at the trade deadline, and you want to have some say in where you go. A 10-team no-trade list, it doesn't give you, necessarily all the say, but at least you can pick some destinations that maybe if you really didn't want to go, you don't have to. So I guess that all makes sense to me. Still not thrilled with him as a backup option, to be honest. But I'm hoping the best for him because I know there's the talent there. I've seen the peaks of what he can do. That 2016 Stanley Cup run, he's the only reason that final series went to 6 games, as you remember, against Pittsburgh. He is capable of completely stealing games at times. And I just hope that he can get back to that. Hopefully Steve Briere can work with him and just help him get back to that form.
Yeah, exactly. And we talked about it in that free agency preview when I kind of brought him up. Like we saw in that Stanley Cup run, one of the things he did so well in that series was he was just basically in the way, right? Like he was just always there. He was just this presence that the Penguins and really other teams throughout that playoff run just could not break through at times. And so it'd be really cool if he could kind of refine that with the Kraken, if the Kraken are able to get that out of him. Otherwise, I think it's kind of nice to have a goaltender that's more similar to Grubauer than Chris Drieger was last year, where you're just kind of oscillating between these wildly different styles of goaltender, and the team kind of has to, certainly the defense has to kind of take that into account and stuff. We know Martin Jones, he's going to be a little bit more technically solid than Chris Drieger was as far as positioning and trying to play angles and stuff like that. Even has some of the same weaknesses as Grubauer in the sense that, hey, he can be leaky up top. Like that's a known quantity with this guy. So I think that's going to be a little nice for everybody, is just kind of having, something more the same in the crease night in, night out. I also don't mind the fact that they did decide to go with a more proven NHL level goaltender instead of I almost said quarterback there. That was weird. Over maybe a more AHL guy and just save the money, because I feel like that's going to be very important for this team after the season that they had last year and not really knowing how far they can push Grubauer this year. We don't, we've talked about it. We don't really want and or think that it's best if Grubauer is playing 60 plus games. You know what I mean? And so with Drieger out, we weren't sure about Decord and where he was at as far as his development and everything, and whether or not he has, the ability with this team, to step up and do it all. So I do think that spending a little extra to get a more proven guy who we know can hang at the NHL level, even if it is in a backup capacity, I just feel like that was very, very important. And I think that that's what Ron was going for here.
Agreed. And he didn't get too much into it as far as Jones. He mentioned that he's someone who's had success at every level that he's played, and that's absolutely true. But yeah, he is someone that if he can get the game going to the proper level, he can certainly handle whatever workload you want to throw at him. He is someone who has started 60 plus games in the NHL 4 times, 4 separate seasons, and not an AHL goalie that you bring in, you don't necessarily know they can handle that workload. So as much as they want to give to Martin Jones workload wise, he can handle it. And so that's a good sign.
Exactly. So is there anything else you want to mention about any of these 3 guys, or should we just go ahead and keep this video nice and short, and we'll just get to, everything else in the next deep dive, and then obviously we'll see what the Kraken do tomorrow?
Yeah, I think we can leave it at that, but one more thing. What's your overall impression of the signings today? How do you feel coming out of today compared to what you were thinking yesterday?
I feel really, really good. I mean, obviously, it's just nice to have like the mystery removed and the whole like, wow, we're going to be in on Gaudreau, or are we getting Klingberg? Like, how is this all shaking up? And at the end of the day, we kind of just got more truth from Ron, right? Like, this has been a theme over the course of us covering this team now for a year plus, right? But at the end of the day, Ron's pretty good about just kind of speaking what he means and then like just doing literally that. We saw that going back to the expansion draft and the way he's kind of wanted to build this team all along. And so he said they were going to bring in a top 6 brought in Burakovsky. Said they were going to bring in a top 9 guy. They still could do that. If not, they drafted Shane Wright, and that kind of fills that need. We talked about that several times now. Wanted to bring in a puck-moving defenseman on the right side. He got Schultz. Wanted to, after the Drieger injury, wanted to bring in kind of a proven NHL backup for Grubauer. He did that with Martin Jones. So it's kind of funny to me that like all of us, fan base, media, all of us, always like start trying to extrapolate all these things. Meanwhile, Ron is like the one NHL general manager giving us his playbook, and we just kind of refuse to see it. But otherwise, I think the Kraken are in a much better spot now than they were last season. I think Burakovsky's going to do a lot to help out this team, particularly on the power play. I like that. I know that Justin Schultz, he has some flaws. People were pointing those things out on Twitter and stuff, but I'm telling you, at the end of the day, he's going to be better than some of the way we were rotating through defensemen last season, and nobody could really get solid footing and all that stuff. He will be a solid presence on that blue line. He'll be a stable presence. Maybe he won't be solid all the time, but he's at least going to be a stable NHL caliber presence back there who can contribute. And then we just kind of covered all that with Martin Jones.
Yeah, exactly. I'm pleased with the results. I do think that all things considered, Ron Francis exercised restraint today, and that's what I wanted to see. He went with Burakovsky at a reasonable number. Schultz was a lower cost option compared to someone like a Klingberg. And then, Martin Jones, the backup situation just is what it is. So I'm happy with the overall results. And he basically did tell us what he was going to do. And when you talk about being aggressive, the only thing you could have maybe understood differently is that he was going to kind of target the top of the free agent class. But, Gaudreau was never really an option. And kind of made that clear geographically. He was never really an option. So I think he did exactly kind of what he set out to do. And I'm pleased with where we're at.
Exactly. At the end of the day, Ron Francis can only work with what he can work with. Forsberg, who we had talked about forever, he re-signed to Nashville. He didn't even get to this point where the Kraken could speak to him. Nichushkin re-signed in Colorado, did not even get to a point where Seattle could talk to him. And so I think Ron did the best with what he was able to do. And ultimately, I think it's probably going to be the best option for them anyway, with just the money and term he was able to get guys at today. So I'm really, really happy with it. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow too, just to see how things shake out and fill out. And then ultimately just looking ahead to training camp, seeing how, Shane Wright's going to do there, and if he's going to be a part of this roster, and just, the first moments of seeing somebody like Burakovsky playing with the Matty Beniers. Like, I think that's just going to be a lot of fun.
For sure. And I'm very looking forward to that.
All right, so that's it for our day one of free agency coverage for the Seattle Kraken. I want to thank you all for joining us, and we will see you all next time.